And so they think, but doing the round robin on Friday night was when I was convinced that I would never run again. Milliken wanted me to run, so I was running. I had a delegate in one of the district meetings get up and saying, I don't think you should be elected. Actually, I think you should be fired. You people are getting high monies and you don't do any work. I almost teared up. I left the room. Jerry Roll and I had no expense money for over 6 months at this time. We both lost our credit and our credit cards and everything else. Half the time we weren't getting paid, and to get accused of not working hard enough.
Yeah.
And that night I decided, I never said anything. I will never run for this thing again.
Well, let me ask you this: was there also, even though your three enemies here, led by Bob Edwards, who was the actual candidate, were ambitious and wanted power and
Sure.
et cetera, was there any kind of an ideological split in the party? People like Jack Wellborn, the conservative state senator you mentioned before, who'd been on Reagan's side, did some of these people, John Engler, Spencer Abraham, were they more conservative than Governor Milliken and yourself and Ellie Peterson and Joyce Braithwaite?
I'm sure they were.
And so they tried to pick up a lot of support from the conservative elements of the party?
I'm sure they were. Before the convention over, it became an anti-Milliken convention. I want to remind people, he's the only office holder we got. Get wise.
Yeah.
I'm sure there was. I just remember the personal attacks on myself. I remember promising to go to Flint and sit down with my opponent,
Bob Edwards?
Edwards,
Yeah.
and get his thing. I went to Bob. He didn't have any new ideas. We had a nice, pleasant lunch. He never offered any ideas, and I never heard from him again. But obviously, it was John Engler had ambitions.
Yeah.
It was.
Well, there was a secret ballot. And you won.
Yeah, they were going to get me. They knew a secret ballot. They were going to win. They were going to get me. Well, we had a secret ballot, and I won very handily on the secret ballot.
I think it was 118 to 690, right?
I'd suggest that was rather
That's good.
decisive.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, and there was something else I forget. But anyways, they tried all kinds of parliamentary things and it didn't work.
Okay, so then it's 1977. Bob Griffin, who was depressed at the fact that his buddy Jerry Ford had failed to be elected to a full term as president, and he himself had lost the minority leader's post. He had been the whip. Was down in the dumps about his experience in the Senate, and he decided, I'm not going to run again. And that led to a chain of events during 77 and 78. Do you want to go through that a little bit?
I would be very happy to. I'm trying to think of one of the 10 years I didn't have a crisis. But
yeah, there's always...
That became a crisis because all of a sudden Brooks Patterson, Phil Rupee, and a half a dozen others wanted to run for the Senate.
Right.
Again, I ran polls. There was no doubt in my mind. The number one chore was to re-elect Milliken, and the strongest ticket was Bob Griffin on it. I ran a statewide recognition poll. I put my name in it because, frankly, immodestly, I'd been on every crossroads in the state for 8 years, and Rupee had never been out of the Upper Peninsula. Esch had never been north of Ann Arbor. I mean, it wasn't they weren't household names.
Yeah.
And with all the publicity I'd gotten, I think I hit 8 on the 8% recognition factor.
8% name recognition.
Yeah, I did that to prove to them, hey, just because it's going to cost a lot of money. Anyways, I kept going to Washington, meeting with Griffin and telling him, Senator, weren't you were down after Ford losing, weren't you premature in saying, I just don't have the fire in my belly anymore, etc.
You were trying to get him to change his mind.
I was trying to get him to change his mind.
And others were working on him too, weren't
of course, I'm sure they were.
Randy Rieker?
Yeah, absolutely. So eventually, comes late in the day, and I sat on the telephone right here. On the other line was Griffin and Marge, Governor Milliken, George Weeks, and Jim DeFrancis. The conversation went for better than 2 hours. We tried, Senator, when you announce, if you're going to go, you have to say, I was down, I've changed my mind, I am new enthusiasm, the whole
Newly enthused.
Yeah.
I've got my energy back.
Where did it go? Where did it go?
Yeah.
And he refused. He had to get in only because the party people pulled him back in, which he did when he announced. All of a sudden, the Brooks Pattersons, the Phil Rupees, everybody under the sun figured it was me that got him back, and Milliken, so we both were the bad guys. And it wasn't. And because he wouldn't do it, he lost the election. Had he just done that, I think he would have been a legitimate candidate.
Because you think Carl Levin and the Democrats were able to use the argument effectively. This is a guy who said he was finished.
Absolutely.
His passion was gone. And now he's saying the only reason I'm agreeing to come back and run is because these people are begging me. I'm not really that committed.
Basically, that was it. And they did use that against him.
Yeah.
They did use that against him.
And meanwhile, it kicked off a chain of events dealing with the lieutenant governor's position, because Jim Damon was one of the people, as lieutenant governor, who announced he was going to run for the Senate.
That's right, he had, yes.
And Brickley is off at Eastern Michigan University for 4 years, and everybody basically, so you had this kind of limbo, and then there was a famous announcement. Everybody was waiting for Governor Milliken to select who is going to be.
Actually, Damon announcing for the Senate was a blessing.
Yeah.
Because I don't think there was any desire after the problems we had before to have
Right.
Damon back on the ticket. And one of the great times of my life was Milliken had scheduled a press conference in the governor's office in Lansing, in the Capitol, to announce for governor. And for the first time in history, the governor was going to announce with his choice for lieutenant governor.
Right.
I always at a press conference stood in the back of the room. I knew what was coming. This day, I wanted to sit up in the front of the room. And I could see the faces of Hugh McDermott and Tim Jones and Tom Green and all the people. And I think it went, Milliken announced, I'm going to run for governor. And I'd like you to meet my lieutenant governor candidate. And open the door, and out walks Jim Brickley. Bill, the jaws
dropped.
Just dropped. I mean,
stunned.
It was dynamite. It was absolute dynamite.
And of course, it completely cut off Damon, because Damon had said, I'm out. And so Milliken had an excuse to say, hey, Damon says he's out.
Absolutely.
He's running for Senate.
It was just magic. It was magic.
Rupee was trapped. He could have gone back and run for his seat, but he said, I won't do it. And he let Bob Davis, a state senator, succeed him.
Right.
So that was a shocker. And then Milliken, you're right in your view that Milliken was very popular, even in '77 when the party faithful, agitated against him at the state convention, because he won his biggest percentage victory in '78 against Bill Fitzgerald.
I hate to tell you my role.
What?
I tried to talk him out of running.
Why?
I just felt that after so many years in office, things get tired. I saw him more and more relying on Joyce and George and myself for decisions. The circle was getting smaller. And I think, after a while, it's time to turn it over. I was wrong. He won his biggest victory and he got out. But I was worried that he'd have a disaster. I was worried he'd have a disaster. So
How much in advance of the election was your counsel to him that maybe he ought to pass up another term?
Well, this was early in the year.
So there was a long way to go.
This was meetings at his house, and I kept saying, I think, and that's long before we even
remember the PBB scare?
Oh yes, yeah, sure, all those things, and
Yeah.
I worried about his